Diggersby isn't the best rogue deck coming in perfect order. It's the only viable rogue deck coming in perfect order. For those of you who didn't watch my set review, first off, how dare you? Secondly, there's just 81 new cards coming on March 26th to replace the 1,000 we're losing due to the G-Block rotation. That's worrying to say the least. But worst of all, it makes my life more difficult trying to convince you into thinking there's playable rogue decks in perfect order. But before we get to the bad options, let's start with Diggersby. For a single colorless, it does 140 damage to their active, plus 30 to each of your bench Pokemon. We've seen this attack a couple times recently with both Steelix and Centiskorch. Paired with things like Arven, Turbo Energize, Precious Trolley, and Munkidori, this strategy of beating yourself off in front of strangers can work. Except rotation takes Arven and Turbo Energize, so you have to use Petrel to find Trolley to fill up your bench now. While there's no replacing Turbo Energize, Diggersby attacking for a colorless energy is huge. This means you can simply attach Counter Gain, attacking for free if you're losing, thus saving up your manual attachment for Munkidori. But that doesn't help with the whole only dealing 140 damage thing, which is 3-shotting Dragapult. That's where Japanese players absolutely cooked. Baby Bloodmoon Ursaluna can take huge knockouts, one-shotting things like Dragapult and Lucario if they have 6 damage counters on them. And since Ursaluna needs fighting energy, you can utilize the Lunatone Solrock engine to draw cards and deal with low HP basics or soften up bigger targets. This is the third place Diggersby list from last week that appears to improve on the original first place build from February. Going for a 2-2 line is a bit risky, but if you can pull off one Earthquake with a full bench, you're able to set up almost everything for Ursaluna later. Recovery is important because Ursaluna only accelerates 2 energy onto itself when it's placed down from hand. That's why there's a Tarragon, 2 Energy Retrieval, and 3 Night Stretcher. You'll also find Energy Search to get your Darkness Energy and Energy Switch to move them between Munkidori. As much as I hate Mr. Slippy Fist, the player who built this version fully embraced him. You need to use Petrel turn 1 to find Trolley. 3 Transceiver plus 4 Petrel almost guarantees it. And 2 Team Rocket's Factory not only bumps Battle Cage, but lets you draw 2 cards after filling up on Petrel. The whole combo infuriates me and makes me wish I'd appreciated Arven more when he existed. I should probably also mention that I'm probably going to run a 3-3 line when I eventually get my toes on Diggersby, because I was testing a Stage 1 deck earlier today on PTCGL and prized all 3 evolutions. So as I've talked about numerous times on stream, whenever you see me make a questionable decision when it comes to deck building or card playing, it's always a result of PTCGL-induced trauma. Looking towards Chaos Rising in May, the deck's kinda dead, but Trap blocks Munkidori unless you're running Team Rocket's Watchtower. You do already need to play a Stadium to counter Battle Cage, but there isn't enough card draw where I think it'll survive the rat infestation. Salazzle's next in terms of power, but we all know you came here to watch me play with my old bone. Ignoring all the stats on Tyrantrum for now, the biggest obstacle is the whole evolving from a fossil thing. Fossils are items, meaning Badoo, Frillish, and Jellicent prevent you from putting them into play. And despite being basic Pokemon when they're in play, you can't start them as your basic at the beginning of a game. So there's multiple issues right off the Crobat. Now, how exactly do you find your fossils? Well, our good friend Petrel makes another appearance, and so too does Drapion. Though if your Totsadiri or Pokegear or Great Ball or Bug Catching set luck is as good as mine, you'll hate Dre a ton. Petrel, of course, immediately grabs an antique Jaw fossil. Drapion, meanwhile, looks at the top 7 cards of your deck, letting you get a trainer and a Pokemon. So you can grab a Jaw fossil and either Tyrunt or Tyrantrum. Neither are perfect, yet one or both is necessary. With all the negatives out of the way, let's get to the positives. If Tyrantrum has a special energy attached, it goes from 180 hit points to 330. Rocky Fighting Energy comes out in perfect order, giving you a perfect option. Legacy Energy and Neo Upper also exist, but they are your A-spec. And the attack on Tyrantrum isn't horrible. It does 160 damage for a fighting and a colorless, milling anywhere from 0 to 1000 cards. But what you really want to use is Tyrunt's Get Angry. Copyable thanks to Relicanth. For the same energy cost, you deal 20 damage times the number of damage counters on Tyrantrum. In a format without Golden Go, surviving a hit when you have 330 hit points becomes much more likely. So if Dragapult hits you for 200, guess what? You hit them for 400 next turn. Unfortunately, I have to stop the Plusles and go back to the Minans. Luxurious Tape and Reversal Energy are gone with rotation, taking 2 cards Tyrantrum would have loved. Now you have to play Counter Gain, Barbaracle, or both in order to reliably attack. And finding Rocky isn't as easy as fisting my bump. Hilda does get it and an evolution, but then you're not playing Petrel or Drapion. If you still think you can fix him, this is what you want a Tyrantrum list to look like. A Trust Your Pilot original, since no one in Japan was crazy enough to do anything with it, I freely admit this will require a lot of testing to get right. I decided to try Barbaracle first, even though it's a little overkill, but it doesn't rely on letting your opponent beat you off in order to attack regularly with Tyrantrum. Obviously early you utilize Lunatone and Solrock for card draw and attacking, hoping to find your fossils. If none of the 4 show up on your own, that's what Tatsugiri and Petrel and Drayton are for. I'd love more Gust and Premium Power Pro, but at the very least you do hit Meowth and Fez for weakness. Otherwise, there's this build with Neo Upper and Counter Gain. Solrock puts early pressure on them, and Baby Ursaluna can take a big KO if your good dinosaur is failing to show up like people did for that Pixar movie. Looking at the list, it should work. Tyrantrum's definitely your closer, so waiting a few turns to get it up isn't the worst thing. 330 hit points hopefully means they're 2-shotting it, opening the door for you to either mill them out or 2-shot most of their things. For those wondering, yes, there are some Pokemon who grab trainers from your deck, making procuring your fossils easier. Unfortunately, the 2 attackers only have 60 hit points, don't evolve into anything good, and a judge potentially removes the item you get. Or there's Noctowl, except then you have to play a Terra like Cornerstone Mask. Instead, just be cool like me and believe in the heart of the cards. Then blame PTCGL when you don't get them. Yet another hit-and-run card in Standard, despite the fact that no one really uses them, Salazzle EX does 100 damage for 2 fire, poisoning and burning in the process. I've mentioned numerous times how this is worse than Excelgor and Low Kicks. Excelgor confuses in addition to poisoning, which is much stronger, and Low Kicks does 150 while putting itself and Ignition Energy back into the deck. The only advantages to Salazzle are that it has 260 hit points and a water weakness in a meta where water is doing about as well as lightning. There's a few questions you have to ask before building a Salazzle EX deck. First, would giving her a high 5 burn you? Second, how the hell do you get 2 fire on this thing in a world without Mela? And who do you promote in a world without Mimikyu? For the energy, the 2 players in Japan with winning lists were split like a banana between Ethan's Ho-Oh and realizing Salazzle sucks. While the Ho-Oh list only had 1 hot turkey when PTCGL pricing will force you to have 2, it's the most likely to work. Use Ho-Oh's ability to accelerate 1 or 2 fire to itself, then Energy Switch and manually attach to Salazzle. As for who to promote, there's really only 2 options in Turtonator and Petrel. If they hit into Turtonator, Thirst Trap activates, discarding energy from their active. Petrel, meanwhile, helps boost your poison damage. Combined with Perilous Jungle, you are dealing 100 damage between turns from both statuses. At just 200 total damage though, you're still failing to knock out anything meaningful. This is that Salazzle Ho-Oh list amended for PTCGL shenanigans. I'm confident it will work. The issue is that the Pokemon Company decided making Salazzle good was an idiotic idea and fired the person who suggested such an outlandish notion. So while you're dealing small amounts of damage, they're taking big KOs. The only way you're winning is if they can't find bosses when they need it, meaning Judge and Unfair Stamp are important, and if they can't retreat. But like when For the Win begs me to talk dirty to him in a perfect English accent, that's asking too much. Otherwise, that other player paired Salazzle with Jellicent and Crispin. Unlike when you put 2 bare feet together, this is a case of 2 halves not making a whole. Jellicent is doing fine on its own, shutting off their tools and items while in the active. Unfortunately for Salazzle, Jellicent's 3 retreat cost means Air Balloon can't be your pivot, which is why there's 3 Surfer. For extra funsies, they included Shiinotic. This puts their active to sleep when it's in the active and has a 2 retreat cost. If they flip tails, they can't attack or retreat the following turn, which is my kind of annoying. Personally, I think you're better off taking out Jellicent. You probably only know about Crustle blocking EX attacks to replace Mimikyu, but there is another. Sylveon works with Air Balloon and Walls EXs, making it a potential partner. Use Judge and Unfair Stamp to keep their hand low, hoping Shiinotic keeps them asleep. This is how I'd build Salazzle Shiinotic Sylveon. It's basically just the Ethan's Ho-Oh version with Shiinotic and Sylveon minus the consistency Dracloak would add. Listen, you know Salazzle's bad, I know Salazzle's bad. But that doesn't mean we can't put a paper bag over her head and pretend she's someone else. I was going to make a does the curtain match the Drapions joke, but it's pronounced Drapion, so that's ruined. Anyway, this deck is not good. Compared to the majority of other cards in perfect order though, it's tier 1. For 3 darkness, Drapion does 100 damage while also paralyzing and poisoning. So it's kind of in the same disappointing realm as Salazzle. Except here, Drapion hits itself for 70, which is actually a good thing. This allows you to spread damage with Munkidori while they're locked in the active. Though, as I pointed out every time a paralysis deck comes up, the problem is that eventually you have to take a knockout. I was able to make Palmot work thanks to Frostlass, but honestly a retreat blocker like Yveltal is faster and easier. Still, I promised you new road decks and give them to you I shall. There was 1 list in Japan to do anything and it paired Drapion with Toxtricity and Munkidori. There's not nearly enough bench space to fit everybody, and a 3 energy attack cost means you need at least 2 Toxtricity in play at all times. But if they have a bad start, you stand a chance. With Skorupi having 80 hit points though, and Munkidori a requirement, the losses of Nest Ball and Artisan and De-Evolution and Reversal Energy are glaring like my ex-wife whenever I looked at old pictures of her and sighed longingly. There's not much room for improvement here aside from definitely adding a Petrel EX. 2 Air Balloon in 1 switch? Nah, give me that Petrel who can freely swap anyone out while also offering someone who can deal big damage at the end of a game. I'm also not sure about Hilda or Iris or Hassel or 3 Night Stretcher. Remember, there's no Super Odd in Standard anymore, so Sacred Ash and Energy Recycler are important. And Morty just seems like a no-brainer along with Perilous Jungle to bump any Battle Cage. But no matter how many changes you make, a Frostless Munkidori Badoo deck with Yveltal will always be better. No, you're not going crazy. Well, I mean, you might be. You are continuing to watch a video where some guy will mention that Yveltal EX is in this video because, like feet in my mouth, it doesn't fit anywhere else. Yes, Luxray EX is not a new card. It came out at the same time as Dragapult and features a worse attack than Mega Absol, dealing 120 damage and discarding a card from their hand. Or for 2 Lightning, it can come up short of a knockout on everyone meaningful who's not a basic EX. So why am I talking about it in 2026? Well, there's literally no other rogue deck candidates in perfect order. But we are getting a new Luxray line. Great at the end of a game, this Luxray does 70 damage times the number of prize cards you have taken. This makes it a slightly weaker Mega Mawile who thankfully only gives up a single prize. And the free retreat doesn't suck either. But the true reason this deck might be a thing is the new Luxio. If they're active as an EX, it can evolve right away. You still have to run Rare Candy, it just offers up another way to get either of your Luxray up quickly. There were a few Japanese Luxray EX lists these past couple of months, yet only one truly believed in the power of Lightning Cat and played 4 Shanks. Obviously paired with Electric for energy acceleration, it used Prime Catcher instead of Unfair Stamp, which I find sus, as the kids would say. The whole thing with Luxray is that it discards a card from their hand. I think you absolutely want to run Unfair Stamp. Though I guess their thinking is that Luxray can one-shot things like Fez and Meowth and Ogerpon for those 2 energy, making Gust more important. I will begrudgingly accept the 1 Mega Electros since it can clean up missed KOs, but I learned in my Canary stream last month that she kinda sucks. Yes, getting 4 Lightning Pokemon from deck is extremely powerful. Except what do you do after that? She doesn't get energy, which is kind of important when Electric Generator is gone. So there's a decent chance you do nothing after sending that Canary into your coal mine. The Rotom is funny though, discarding all items and tools from their hand for a single Lightning. Stunfisk also helps early, either KOing a Badoo or trapping their active. And Zerosic punishes anyone who gets a big hand. Looking at the list, it is underwhelming. Still, if you can hit the right cards with Rotom's discard effect, or keep a Meowth or Fezandipity stuck like my stepsister in the dishwasher, the deck will function. Until you remember that everyone here is weak to fighting and Mega Lucario is a top deck post-rotation. While Yveltal EX does have a 210 damage attack that can be useful in a Trapinch, the only reason you'd think about trying this in the first place is Destructive Soul. Now, the initial reaction when jerking someone off with your knee is to pair it with Frostless Munkidori. It's not an easy combo to pull off, but with a Counter Gain, a manual attachment, and energy switching and energy off of Munkidori, you can do the thing. This is roughly what Yveltal Frostless Munkidori Badoo would look like post-rotation. Until the last Timmy turn or 2 of the game, you don't do anything special, just building up damage. Then at the end of the game, you destroy their soul, hoping to line up KOs. But that's a lot of different cards that have to be in your feet at the same time. No, the best way to play Yveltal EX next format is with Toxtricity, Munkidori, and Mega Absol. For 2 Darkness and a Colorless, Yveltal EX instantly KOs each of your opponent's Pokemon with 50 or less hit points remaining. Rocky Fighting Energy and Mist Energy do block the effect, so just hope they aren't playing them. If they aren't, Absol's out here dealing 200 damage each turn, discarding the best card from their hand. Munkidori, meanwhile, is healing any damage that comes your way, setting up KOs with Yveltal. Obviously, higher HP threats will be tougher to math, but luckily most decks play weak things like Psyduck and Shaman. 1 Munkidori to each, Yveltal takes 2 easy prizes. And if your opponent's playing Alakazam, well, they auto-lose if you go first and have a decent turn 1 because every Abra has 50 hit points. This is the only Yveltal list from Japan to finish in first place. It seems like a bit of a mess, and yet again highlights the fact that they don't have access to TCG Live in Japan, because there's basically just 4 Lillies for card draw along with 2 Pokegear. And 1 Mega Absol means the PTCGL dev is licking their toes, waiting to prize it every single game. More or less though, it is a Toxtricity Toolbox deck, not an Yveltal deck. Brute Bonnet's the best attacker here, dealing 50 damage plus 50 more for each damage counter on their active. Team Rocket Sneasel snipes 20 damage for each damage counter on a bench Pokemon. And Baby Petrel traps and poisons, setting them up for a KO later. Additionally, you can just add a single copy of Yveltal to that surprisingly good Mega Kangaskhan Sharpedo deck I played not too long ago. The strategy is quite clever. You attack with the Pedo using its free retreat to go into Kangaskhan, draw 2 cards, then Petrunt your Sharpedo back into the active. For some reason, they cut Binding Mochi in favor of the "oh no you don't" Munkidori EX, which I am firmly against. So while I would make a couple tweaks to the list, it all functions how it should. Do a slightly underwhelming amount of damage with Sharpedo, spread counters with Munkidori, and try to set up a board wipe with Yveltal late. And that's all the road decks coming in perfect order. Aside from Diggersby, don't expect to have any success with any of them. As for the cards I didn't cover like Gengar and Raticate, you could build a deck around them. But just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. Unless that thing is subscribing, because we're almost halfway to 69,420.